Okay, everyone, let's get started. Thank you to all of you who've joined from around the world. I really appreciate the turnout. My name's Edmund Irvington, and I'm lucky enough to be here presenting the joint Google and Unbabel webinar focused on how you can serve your global customer base more easily. A little bit of housekeeping just to kick off with. So we're recording this webinar, so everyone's aware, and we'll certainly be sending the link out to you afterwards. We'll also be sending a short survey about the webinar that will both give you a chance to give feedback, but also get in touch with either Google or Unbabel if you so wish. I think more importantly, there's a Q&A tool within the webinar itself. You should be able to see it within the interface. If you just put any questions in there in real time, we'll gather them up. Some may be answered during the webinar, and then we've also allocated some time at the end to answer your questions. So with that, I'm delighted to introduce Pooja from Google. I will hand it over to her to introduce herself and also give it a little bit of background context about the Unbabel and Google partnership and why we're here today. Pooja, over to you.
Great, thanks, Ed. Hi, everyone. I've been at Google about 9 years and worked in India, US, and UK. So worked a lot with Google's clients that want to scale their operations and go international. Also spent a lot of my time within the customer care team. So think launching or scaling global operations or running global programs and partnerships across Google's support infrastructure. So that would be advertisers, partners, publishers, consumers, retailers, etc. Now I'm currently supporting the Global Business Solutions team, and I wanted to give you some more background about what we do. So the Global Business Solutions team, as I alluded to, is actually Google's kind of team within the international growth team, and it officially launched in 2017 different advisory services related to localization, global payments, international logistics, and global customer experience solutions to help our clients alleviate operational hurdles when they expand internationally. So our team really aims to make internationalization seamless for our clients by providing some expert advisory based on our own experiences and making partner introductions across each of these areas if and when necessary. Speaking of partner referrals, Unbabel has actually already supported many of our clients in their customer experience strategy as it relates to speaking the customer's language and providing multilingual support. So we thought it was probably best for us to come together through this webinar and really facilitate this dialogue across the different folks here. Great. So really looking forward to the discussion. And since we've already been working with a lot of the clients that are already on the call, I actually wanted to ask a couple of questions to Edmund and really facilitate this dialogue. So Edmund, one of the things that we've been noticing as we're talking to more customers is that there's a trend really kind of evolving the customer experience offerings for English-speaking customers. The concept and the effort has just been around longer, I suppose, for English-speaking customers. And so you can really see that companies are more optimized internally to scale and continuously improve operations in English. As a result of this, I'm actually very curious to see what are you noticing in terms of the trends and changing support landscape?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think fundamentally, we all know in our hearts that when you deal with a customer in their own language, when you offer an experience to a customer in their own language, they're going to be much more receptive. But we're seeing a couple of macro trends that really back that up. So firstly, I think a nice starting point is to understand how the internet has changed. If you go back to 1996, almost all of the internet was in English. That was where it started and was being predominantly built. And fast forward to now, that's just not the case anymore. There's almost mini internets around the world in Chinese and Russian and Spanish. And this is very interesting as a narrative when you compare it to how conversely we've sort of conquered connectivity, conquered device proliferation, even payments and shipping around the world to make the globe from a commercial perspective less siloed, yet we sort of have more silos in terms of language than ever before. And this is a problem, and we're finding that it's almost the final frontier of having a really amazing and successful customer experience is overcoming that language barrier. You know, we see this other macro trend of generally customer experiences moving away from voice to non-voice. Now that's obviously not exclusive, and that's obviously not across every single industry, but in general, we're seeing a much larger proportion of the non-voice customer service, which kind of segues me nicely into Unbabel and what we're all about. So when it comes to the translation of stuff in the world, there's really been this fairly polarized spectrum. On one end, there is machine translation. So that is done beautifully by the likes of Google and many others for the consumer. So the ability to talk to your family member is essentially now solved. We have Google Translate, among other things, that does a really good job of allowing you to do fast, easy communication that sounds quite good with those who speak other languages. The issue with that is that it's not enterprise ready. You know, it doesn't bake in the quality around the jargon, the product names, etc. of your business. And then also it kind of fails at the critical times, the bits of the interaction with between a customer and a company where someone's really angry or someone's very emotional or someone writes something badly, which usually happens when things are really important. It kind of doesn't match that use case. And on the other end of the spectrum, you know, translation is not a new thing. Translation is something that there are very large companies around the world doing very well. Yet they've naturally focused on human-centric translation. So having really high-quality translators sat sometimes in-house that do incredibly high quality, but quite slowly and for a lot of money. And there wasn't particularly anything that sat in the middle. There wasn't something that solved the high-frequency, high-volume content that flows every day between companies and their customers. And this is really what Unbabel's spent the last 5.5 years fixing. So we have, we think, done quite a nice job of taking a hybrid approach to this. So what we do is we pair the best of AI with the gig economy. And that sounds very much a buzzword sentence. So let me break it down a little bit into what I mean. What we do is we take a neural model. So we bake into machine translation your company's brand, your product names, your tone, your style, the way you've elected in different languages to talk to those customers in terms of formality. And we have as much of the work as possible been done with AI. But then we say that in pretty much all situations, that's not quite enough. And so what we have is this large community of tens of thousands of native bilinguals in a gig economy model who are polishing that. And every time they touch it and make it better, it feeds back and improves the AI for next time. And over the last 5.5 years, we've been lucky enough to work with the most interesting, fast-growing brands around the world and really perfect this model where we focus 100% on customer service. And we just really become the domain experts in allowing you as a growing business to talk to your customers in any language. And this has obviously lots of applications. But what's really interesting is that for organizations, we're seeing that this ticks some boxes. This really ticks some sort of almost C-level agenda items quite nicely. When we do this, it's an AI story. You know, AI is very much over rhetoricked and under-delivered as a thing in the world. And what we find is that there's very few tangible, almost AI in a box ways to measure the impact and deliver an AI success story within your business. And we have shown time and time again with our customers that we can be just that. We're also a sort of low risk way of companies adopting a gig economy strategy. You know, we take the risk of the ownership of that gig economy model so that companies don't have to build their own. And it actually is a huge benefit for us because you've got this wonderful cyclical nature between the gig economy humans, the native bilinguals polishing it, and then the AI getting better over time. And what's also nice is that in no way, shape or form are we taking away jobs from humans. In fact, our only mission in the world is to say that the human agent, the customer service experience, the person themselves is the most important part of this. And we just want to enable them to be better than they ever have before. You know, in essence, turn them into super agents, allow them to deal with any language in any written content format from anywhere in the world and do their best job. And this has been really powerful. In terms of, you know, what does that mean practically? Well, we've been seeing that we deliver three main content types. You know, we can deliver your standard asynchronous tickets, whether that's emails or social media inquiries or web forms. We've also built out both synchronous and asynchronous chat workflows for customers, whether it's a full real-time experience where we do the human polish after the fact and keep improving it over time, or more of an asynchronous messaging trend, which is what a lot of companies are moving to right now. And of course, because we have this amazing community of editors and Unbabblers, as we call them, we can also just save you a lot of money and hassle with your help centers and knowledge bases and stop you having to use expensive standard translators, which are slow, painful, lots of spreadsheets and manual work is involved. So that's where we've got to at the moment. You know, Pooja, I'll hand back to you and see if that answers your question and if you've got any others.
No, absolutely. It's actually great the way you explained how you merged the two, because what we've been noticing when we've been talking to clients, it's either or, right? So it's either going the route of machine translations, but then obviously not always getting that kind of hitting the sweet spot with them, but or then just hiring temporary linguists on the team. But again, that's not always a very long-term solution. So I really loved how you presented that. I was wondering if, I know you're going to be talking about another client there, but I think this is a good way to segment kind of into our client that we've supported together. So, you know, we have met Daniel Wellington as a part of the export program at Google as well to help them in the internationalization journey. But I know Unbabel's also worked very closely with them on different opportunities. And I'd love to really bring that example to life and just show how the two together in terms of consultations can really help bridge the gap.
Yeah, no problem at all. And it's probably a nice way to explain the value we're seeing to our customers generally. So when I think about, you know, what could a fast growing business, whether you're right now a domestic company thinking about going global, or you're maybe a European company thinking about how you conquer APAC, or vice versa, we're really seeing that we help companies with two distinct areas of value. So number one is that there's a set of operational problems that are just very frustrating. You know, I've worked in multiple fast growing companies over the last 10 years, and the idea of, do I build regional hubs? Do I hire native speakers? Do I outsource? Is all just an irritation to a company that's doing incredibly well. You know, you face things like seasonality peaks, both planned and unplanned. You have some frustrating long tail languages like Nordics, etc., where they're incredibly important to service 24/7, but actually having a Norwegian speaker, for example, sat there, or 5 Norwegian speakers to cover 24/7, 365 is kind of inefficient. You've also got just some expensive languages, you know, German, Italian, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. These are all very expensive to service with native speaking agents. And so we either mitigate or solve all of those problems overnight. We allow you to dissipate all of those operational challenges across a whole team. So that's kind of the first thing we see with clients like Daniel Wellington. And the second is that when you've solved those problems, suddenly you have the space to think about what the long-term value looks like. And for a lot of our customers, what that means is, for the first time ever, they're able to think about picking the right low-cost location with the perfect blend of cost per agent and written English skills, or any other language skills for that matter, to support all languages. They no longer have language as an inhibitor. And what I find is, when I start to look at what companies have done when they've gone through their growth stage, their scale up stage, is they've made a lot of their decisions based on language. They've decided which vendors to use from an outsourcing perspective, which locations to use. And we allow them to have a little bit more of a holistic, elegant strategy when it looks at those things. And so, yeah, dovetailing into our joint customer, Daniel Wellington, I think this is a perfect example where we take a company that's, you know, over the last 5 years, they've grown nearly 5,000%. They've been an incredible success. They make these beautiful watches, and they're focused on the mid part of the market, which means that they have a very high volume of transactions. They have a lot of customers, but those customers are pretty demanding. You know, if something goes wrong, they do expect an answer. They do expect to talk to the company that they bought this from online. And we've allowed them to really scale operationally without any hassle at all. We've seen some beautiful results in terms of increased CSAT, you know, doubling their response time, and just overall, in every single way to measure, you know, CSAT, NPS, KPIs, just better customer experience. And this has really been the genesis of our conversation today, I think, is when we see all of these companies around the world that are growing fast with Google, that are seeing these issues that come with the global market, and we're just taking the pain away is the easiest way to explain it. So I think with that, unless you've got any other questions, Pooja, we can move on to some audience questions. But let me know if you've got any thoughts you want to wrap up on that slide.
No, I was just, while you were presenting that, I was just thinking of this, you know, the multiple internet concept, basically, because we're not, you know, we're just developing in a place where different users have their own kind of custom needs. And if we're optimizing for one user, we're not actually optimizing for anyone. And so I feel like this is a very powerful tool for companies to kind of equip themselves with in order to provide these, well, in order to really come across in these really big opportunities as companies that care for the customers. And I think this is just one of the, you know, most powerful tools to really be there when it matters.
Yeah, I completely agree. So feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'm getting them through in real time. While we see if there's any questions, I'll just talk a little bit about a couple of the different approaches I've seen work really well when companies are thinking about this. So, you know, when I think about our first client almost 5 years ago now, you know, they were one of the biggest success stories in social networking. And they had an age-old problem, which was that they were based in Silicon Valley and they didn't really know what to do when they started having this massive global traction. They had a sort of 25 customer service agents. They were starting to do some big deals with publishers around the world and media agencies. And obviously those clients and those, you know, multi-million, tens of $1 million contracts had fairly high expectations attached and hundreds of stakeholders within each one across the world. And we just allowed them to elegantly keep their current customer support team and suddenly be able to handle tickets in Chinese and Japanese and German without even thinking, literally turning it on overnight. And that was really one of our first case studies that worked to sort of solidify the value in our heads of this and the fact that no one else was focused on this area of the market. We then had another situation that really predicated itself on a company who was about to launch a new piece of hardware, virtual reality hardware actually, in an Asian market. And they were, you know, about to spend tens of millions of dollars on a new operations center in this country because they were, you know, they were fully invested, they were going big, but they were worried about the fact that all of these people would be new and ramping before the product had even launched. And they suddenly realized that this team in the middle of America who was already doing this could be activated to take that workload within their current shift patterns without blinking, and, you know, genuinely saving them tens of millions of dollars in OpEx expenditures of this new site. Then as I start to think about what the sort of the next stage is for these companies. So you've grown, you've maybe gone through Series B, Series C, you've really started to get huge traction in the market. I think that we're finding that there's a couple of options depending on the type of company you are. One is that there might be a location based on the skill set you require that's really good for you. You know, it could be that you have a particular need for B2B travel agents. And so there might be a couple of places in the world where maybe the big companies like Amadeus, et cetera, have been, and you want to utilize that pool of resource for your skill. And so we allow you to do that. We allow you to centralize all your efforts on a single place. And the other, and maybe slightly more long-term strategic view, is to unlock the power of offshoring early. The Philippines, India, and other locations like Cape Town are beautiful in terms of their balance of skill and cost. And they're now highly mature in terms of generations of career call center workers offering incredible customer service. And before that was something that big companies did. Big companies used offshoring to save money. And now actually what we see is we can take a fast growing company hitting product market fit globally, and they can get ahead of their own strategy. They can literally pick their location in advance and start building the team there that services the whole world. And I think if I'm a fast growing company right now, that is the most exciting part. So just a couple of questions are coming in. First question is, what kind of impact have companies seen on utilization metrics when ramping up teams with Unbabel's technology? Great question. So I think the key metrics that people care about at the beginning are the very obvious ones. Translation itself is almost a magical concept in most people's heads. Some people are blessed with being multilingual, but most of us, especially me, struggle with understanding how people can seamlessly translate between languages. And so people want to measure quality. But what we find is we quite quickly move away from measuring quality, make sure it either hits or exceeds the equivalent of their native speakers, which is what we see time and time again, and actually move to measuring the same CSAT or NPS metric that you actually care about. And so that for me is the core parameter. We do measure, of course, the speed, the quality on an ongoing basis, but actually that's not what's important after a while. It's more of a threshold. Once you've hit quality, you've hit quality. That's great. We need to move and we need to measure the customer satisfaction, because that's what matters. Another question coming in about languages. What languages do you support? And do you have examples of quality check to assure no grammar mistakes or logical wording translation? Yeah, exactly. This is really the essence of Unbabel. So to answer the question directly around what languages we support, right now we have 29. They are exactly the European and Asian languages you'd expect. And obviously the nuances between working in Portuguese in continental Portugal and Brazil, for example, we differentiate between the two. But more importantly, we can bring on languages on demand for clients for minimum volume commitments. So we aren't really limited by what languages we support. We're limited by what our customers need, which quite often tends to be less than they imagine. In terms of quality checking, we have it built in at so many layers. So we build it at the AI stage to make sure that we've got very defined parameters around the tone and the style, but also obviously the grammar and the spelling needed. And then more importantly, we have the human step as part of this process. And then we aid the human step with extra tools, almost like a Grammarly or spell check on steroids. We aid them with the ability to very quickly understand if there's any grammatical errors, fix them, and move on. So we do this all the time. We obviously monitor this, have professional linguists looking from the outside and making sure that our content is good with samples. And what we find is that our quality, if you want to kind of fixate on that metric, tends to be better than a native agent because of these extra steps we put in place. Final questions about APAC regions and languages there. What kind of experience do you have working with the APAC region and the complexity of the language? So we do service all of the major APAC languages: Japanese, both traditional and simplified Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, etc. We find that a lot of our customers, especially the fast growing ones, tackle these early, especially Japanese, Chinese, and Korean as key markets that they're going after, especially e-commerce, B2C organizations. And so we have been focused on them for the last 5.5 years. And you're absolutely right in terms of the complexity. Japanese is a great example where they have more formality layers and more expectations in terms of formality than some other languages. So again, we just build that into both the AI and human part. And really, if I'm honest, it boils down to the fact that that community of tens of thousands of native bilinguals are actually native in the language they're translating to. So they're actually native Japanese, as the example goes. And so they really understand the nuance of what that ticket's saying and what that customer wants in quite a distinct way that allows them to polish it perfectly. So I think that's it for questions for now. Pooja, I'll just pass back to you to see if you want to ask any more questions or add any thoughts based on the questions so far.
No, I actually just curious to see what happens next.
Absolutely. So there's going to be a survey coming out to you all. We really encourage you to both respond in terms of anything you found useful or missing from this webinar, but more importantly, any follow-up actions you'd love from either Google or Unbabel. We'd be very excited to talk to each of you after this. And then we're actually going to be embarking on a series of post-webinar activities, workshops and other, and we'll be in touch regarding them and hopefully get as many of you involved as possible. Pooja, let me know if I've forgotten anything and we can wrap this up.
Nope, it was great. Thanks so much, Ed.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining. You can have 3 minutes of your life back and have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.